The topic, I'll read out the topic for the benefit of the delegates in the audience. Product testing, how to get it right the first time. And I think the word testing here is a metaphor for validation more than anything else, not quality assurance necessarily. And I think, in today's world, we've seen a dramatic shift towards a mobile first, a design first, an experience first perspective on new product release, and so we're going to try and learn from our panelists here what they're doing. We've got a little bit of a bias towards B2B, but Ritwik has promised to talk a little bit about B2C in his comments. And I think fundamentally this is about how do you get a product out to market in the fastest time possible with the minimum viable feature set and with an awesome experience, right? And so maybe Avlesh, you could start off, the mic's in front of you. Give us a little bit background on WebEngage first, yourself, and then can you walk us through a little bit of what experiences you've had on this, on our specific topic here?
Sure. Hi, my name is Avlesh. I'm the co-founder and CEO at WebEngage. We are a Mumbai-based startup. Been around for almost 2 years now. And we're primarily a customer engagement toolkit for online businesses. So if you would have, how many of you have recently made an online purchase? Quite a few. So all those intrusive pop-ins and nudges that you would have seen on those sites that ask you to make a purchase by offering you a discount or a coupon, or making you aware of something new on the store, are in most cases powered by WebEngage. I'm talking about Indian websites. So that's essentially what we do, a self-serve tool for marketers in these companies, which allow them to run these targeted promotions on their website, as opposed to running it off the website. And we are a very small team based out of Bombay, all of 20 people right now, and scaling reasonably well. Product is one of the key differentiators for us, not only in terms of the feature sets and the capabilities, but essentially the very single paradigm that that it works for teams who really don't want to go back to their dev or IT to run experiments on the side. So I'll talk about it, but more or less our philosophy behind product building has been this. We build a tool for marketers which essentially works out of the box without asking them to go back to their dev to change anything on the site. It just works out of the box, and that's what we do.
Great, Avlesh. So you've really got two sets of users there, right? You've got the customer who actually buys the product and deploys it, and then you've got the end user.
In a way, B2B, B2C, yes.
Yes, agreed. Perfect. Ritwik, could you give us a little bit background on your product experiences?
Sure. So I'm not a product guy anymore. I'm with Inventors Capital. We are an early stage tech-focused VC firm. Invest primarily in India and in US in tech firms like Vizuri. And I'll talk a little bit about myself, where my product experience comes from. So before becoming a VC, I used to be a product manager. I spent approximately 4 years at Google building new products for them, and mostly B2C products. The two products that I can talk about today during the conversation is, the first was what is known as Voice Search, which is the speech recognition product at Google, which started off as a 411 product and then eventually became a key part of Android. And the second product that I worked on Google, which was launched the entire mobile editions of Google News, both on tablets as well as mobile. And I can talk more about what the philosophy inside Google was, how do we scale consumer products, and how do we launch it. And the second perspective, I think, if time permits, I'll throw a little bit of investor perspective right now. When we look at companies, when we look at our portfolio as well as new companies, how do we look at the entire product market fit? How do we look at the iterations that these companies are doing, and throw some light on that?
Great, that'll be awesome. And so Chetan, tell us a little bit about Vizuri and what y'all are doing, and how y'all go about designing kind of product and releasing and.
Sure. So I'm the co-founder CEO of Vizuri. We call ourselves a digital CRM company. So basically, what we help marketers, advertisers do is gather all the data that essentially kind of comes up when consumers interact with brands in the digital world. And then two is use it in powering their marketing conversation across multiple channels. Right now, the two channels we power are mobile and desktop display, but the idea is to sort of do more in time to come. And just to give you a sense of the scale, we have about 500 plus customers globally spread across 3 different continents. A majority of our revenues are from outside India, so I can certainly get in some of the global perspectives in terms of this specific question. But just in terms of the stakeholders, in terms of design that we have cared about, the 3 stakeholders that we have cared about are our marketing clients who actually pay us, our publisher partners and vendors who we pay, but then there are sort of dependencies there. And 3 is the end consumer to whom you end up targeting and retargeting, and sort of the dynamics there. And the 2 to 3 aspects that I believe I can sort of throw in light on are, number 1 is just the experience of engaging a user through an advertisement, and how has that evolved for us over a period of time. The second part is the software experience in terms of integration with various stakeholders in the ecosystem, and how do you make that seamless and more sort of frictionless. And the third aspect is in terms of time, and because for us, the element of responding faster and within the kind of boundaries is also very, very critical on all sides of the ecosystem. So I can certainly sort of throw in some light on that as well. Yeah.
Great. So, I'll start with Avlesh. Tell us a little bit about how many years have you been building the WebEngage product? How many versions have you gone through? How fast are you releasing? And how do you take customer input, right, and feedback and all of that? What is the loop you've created, the virtuous loop?
Sure. So we've been around for 2 years now, and I think it's a very iterative process these days with most companies that you'll see, B2B or B2C. The question around how many iterations, I think the numbers would run into several hundreds, if not thousands. People iterate very, very fast these days and make changes to the product. It's not just adding more capabilities, more features. Many a times these days, I've come across companies, including us, who very proactively kill features. And we do it, we do it on an ongoing basis. We very vigorously track how people are using, and which means very, very heavy on data analytics, very, very heavy in terms of how our own product is being used, and take that data back into the product and decide what works and what doesn't. And then the whole feedback cycle, wherein people ask for more, why we can't do this versus why we can't do that. To give you a context, it's many a times for a tool like this, which is so our value proposition for teams are very very simple. We are one of those tools which allow on-site marketing, a phenomena which has been primarily off-site till now. So you would do your SEM, you would do your SEO, you would do Vizuri, you would do email, you do a whole bunch of things to get people onto the site, and where it kind of goes away from marketing and goes to the product team is when people actually come to the website. Now that there are people onto the site, you've got millions of them by spending money, what is happening with them has always been limited to analytics post facto. So a Google or an Omniture, for example, will tell you that 1,000 people came to your site, out of which 500 people made a purchase, and so on and so forth. All that analytics in BI, it sits in these platforms. And our intent was to actually make it actionable. So if you know that 500 people come to your website, go to the cart page and abandon it every day, if that's something that you know, we've made it actionable. Then and there in real time. It comes with its own set of problems. Now, every time we intend to do something on the site, we sit as a plugin on the website, which is limited in terms of what it allows you to do. Marketers want more, right? They need more capabilities in terms of targeting the right audience, sending it to, showing it to only a certain segment of people. Our approach to the product has been that people will keep asking for more, and we have to just live to one value proposition that we've built, which is no code changes on the site.
So let's just walk through a life cycle. How do people ask for more? What is your channels of communication with your customers?
It has been through multiple ways. So one is, you had a certain use case in mind, and the capabilities that we offer, you're not able to fit that use case in. So you would reach out to us if we had to do this. How would we go about doing it? And in most cases, it's always about, why don't you pass more data to us? Why don't you, add more code to the site, and it'll work. Every time we get to that question, and that becomes a bottleneck, we go back and then go back to the whiteboard and figure out how do we make that redundant? How do we, because the feature itself it brings in enough value. So we already know that, more people would want to do it. However, for doing it, they'll have to again go back to dev, which is the value proposition we started with. You never have to go back to dev. So that's the only single philosophy. That's the only single metric that we always have in mind when we design products and features.
So do you all brainstorm new features on your own, or is it mostly customer driven at this point?
It's mostly within the team.
Got it.
It's mostly within the team. The reason why I'll tell you the new stuff we don't. It's a conversion tool. It helps you sell more. Now, more is subjective. How much more you want to sell more, which doesn't necessarily mean more pop-ups on the site.
Sure.
You can't be showing pop-ups endlessly on the site. Can't be bugging users, right? So what we have today is a very global. We didn't have it earlier, but now most of these people, they started abusing the system because it's helping you sell. Let's use more of it, which is an intrusion for the end user in a same session. So we have now global controls, which we can kind of emphasize on not going beyond a certain level of usage.
So you throttle them back.
Yes. So we had to put that in place.
Got it. Now, when you put out a new feature to the topic at hand, do you put out different versions of it concurrently? Do you have different teams working on those features, competing with each other to kind of put out a better feature? How does that work internally?
It's a very difficult one. We have faced this several times. And so, for example, as we speak, there is a new dashboard being rolled out. So a brand new version of WebEngage is being rolled out for customers. I think it's happening today itself. Now, the way we are doing it is we are selectively doing it for a few customers. That control sits with us. And then we have the option of going back to the previous version. Doing that is a very difficult one. It's a very, very difficult one.
So you've got all that harness infrastructure to do rolling upgrades,
We do.
rollbacks, all of that.
Yes, we do. Not for everything though. So the incremental features, we just roll it out and we track it through events by figuring out whether it is working or not. Right. But the major overhaul like this, we always have the option available for people to go back for some period of time. And it's difficult because, there are people, as you said, there are people working on this, people working on that. New feature rollouts will have to happen in this as well as in that. So it's not an easy one to do. But when there is a major overhaul like this, we have to do it.
Got it. So
I'll take the same question.
Please.
Let me take the same question and throw, my B2C perspectives on this. So when we were at Google, there was one underlying philosophy, and whenever we were thinking of new features, was the first feature philosophy was that if you can't instrument it, that feature is not worth building, because that means you cannot measure it and you cannot even improve on it, or you cannot even say whether a user really likes it, it's redundant, not redundant. So that was the first criteria that was put in, whether can you instrument it or not. The second thing, I think every product had its own whole bunch of own metrics, but if you actually were to distill down those metrics, they would fall down into two broad categories. And I think, and those two categories were growth, are we actually getting new users out of it or not? And the second was retention. Are your existing users, using the features, or is it helping you retain more your existing users, or engage them in a certain way better or not? And everything that you did had to fall in either of those two buckets and measure them relentlessly. Now, when you're rolling out a new feature, say for example, when we were building voice search, we didn't have the luxury of having millions of users to be able to do A/B testing or things like that. We would actually roll out features on a weekly basis to an entire set of user base, and sometimes even kill a feature and replace it with a completely new feature to see which one is working better or not. And that's how we would kind of come up with a priority list. But when we were doing the same thing on a product which was already established, like for example, Google News, the mobile edition, which had millions of users, we would actually roll out simultaneous sets of features to 0.1% of the user base is getting feature A being tested out. The other 0.1% of the user base is getting feature B, C, D, and so on and so forth, and actually simultaneously let the engineers compete between themselves based on the data to actually come up with a priority list of what actually needs to be rolled out or not. And most of these times, these features which are rolled out to a small set of user base, they were not even complete features developed itself. They were small hacks to kind of simulate what the feature would actually eventually become. Some sort of a minimum viable product or some kind of minimum viable feature set. And you kind of do those hacks in a small controlled experiment, get the data, and then take the decisions.
So one more follow-up question to you, Ablesh. How early should you be using kind of these techniques, right? Because, when is the populace of your user base even statistically significant to do an A/B test, right?
Sure. Yes, I was about to anyways take it on.
Google has the advantage of they can do 0.1%. And
Early on, you are struggling with people to use your product, right? So you really don't know what to build and what to kill. I think most of these companies, these days, they always are in beta, B2B or B2C for some time. And the whole idea during that phase is, to figure out what to build in the very first place. And that's a very iterative process. You have to prioritize. Yes, you have to. And because it's a small customer base that that you are catering to at that point of time, very simple things like, feedback loops or email chains, they help you figure out how people are using the product. And even in some cases, a lot of these ready-made analytics tools, they give you a good sense. They give you a very good sense of how people are using the product. Being a small subset, you have that luxury of, doing a manual intervention and figuring out a lot of things all by yourself. Unless you have gotten to, a production state wherein the code is being used, the product is being used by real people for a real case, only then you get into the whole automation suite of figuring out how to really improve it on an ongoing basis. Until then, manual is the way to go.
all right. So Chetan, we both have a trilogy background, where, in some sense UX was very important. The out-of-box experience was very important, right? Very early. So, how have you been thinking about it at Vizuri?
Sure. So I think 2 to 3 dimensions there. Firstly is just about, because we are a B2B company, the business who's using us is one of the customers, right? So what we have sort of done on that front is we have essentially defined the touch points that go in, right from integration that needs to happen to reporting to kind of some of the support services that you provide. And iterated on them. So that's been sort of one of the, so experience not only doesn't means kind of seeing an ad or seeing a good website, it also means all these sort of other things that come along with it in terms of installing the product and using it. And the way we did it was we had, for example, on the business model front, I think we had about 50 business models running at one point in time. The question you asked him about, do you listen to your customers or do you go out on your own and kind of stake your claim? On that front, I think we have been iterative to a large extent. So, and this is also driven by the diversity of markets we are in. I mean, for example, a Chinese client where we have about 100 clients now versus a Japanese client where we have about 80 clients now have different set of expectations from the same proposition that you have. You may say that I'll help you re-engage, drive more conversions, drive more engagement, but the way they measure the value out of this would essentially vary. So business model iteration and the way we sort of started off with 2 business models to about 50 business models back to about 10 to 15 now, has been a sort of learning experience in terms of how do you iterate on what fits the market at the same time, set of things that you can essentially manage. The second set of things in terms of customer experience, and this is more B2C, has been the recommendation algorithm that we have. Which essentially tells the advertiser what is the right ad to show to that user at that point in time. And we have a sort of proprietary algorithm built out by a bunch of data scientists. But the way we did that particular part of it was when we developed it, we had about 16 versions running in parallel, right? And initially it was a manual intervention that would choose, let's say number 4 is working better than number 2, or a number 8 is working better than number 4. But as we essentially sort of went along, we started seeing clear patterns in terms of what worked, what did not. So the next layer of intelligence got built in terms of a homing algorithm that would say, let's say 1, 3, 7 work well for this advertiser. So there is automatic sort of weight being assigned to that. So those 2, 3 things have worked for us in terms of taking feedback and constantly iterating.
Got it. For the benefit of the audience, Chetan's company does what is called retargeting, right? So if you've ever been to an online travel site and about to book a trip to Pune, and then maybe you abandoned, and then you go surf somewhere else, and suddenly the ads are all the ads for Pune flights, right? You can blame him for that. So, and then obviously Avlesh is popping up as soon as you're ready to buy that ticket with all kinds of questions that, post the ticket, right? So I'd love to open it up to the audience as well. So please line up some questions if you could. But Avlesh, where does the creativity come in if everything is data-driven? how do you actually, disrupt the market? Because all you're doing is you're comparing your maybe bad apple with another bad orange, right? And both of them were sucked in the first place, that this one sucks less than that one, right? So let me go with the one that's, how do you avoid that problem, right? What do you benchmark yourself against? A/B test is great for an internal benchmark. How do you benchmark against the industry?
The answer would drastically vary for a B2C product. In a B2B, as I tried explaining earlier, the core value proposition always remains the same. But how people look at you and how people perceive of you, there is one single goal when they have, with products like us, there is a single goal: more conversions, more upsells, and so on and so forth. That's a single-minded goal. People are very open to experimenting anything new that you have to offer. So if you figured out that this is a new way of engaging, and that'll help you convert more, people are very willing to try it out. And I'm not just talking outside India market, within India as well. There is an increasing reception towards trying out stuff. People are willing to try as long as there is a core value proposition that it promises, and as long as it's able to deliver. For us, we have done a lot of interesting things in the last 6 months or so, which were not even a part of our so-called roadmap. We didn't even had plan to do any of those. The reason, more data. You talk about data with scale. It's amazing how much data can enlighten you in terms of what's working versus what's not, and what potentially could work. So today, if you look at, I'll give you a very simple example, and this is very data driven. So yesterday, if you use WebEngage, it would ask you, what do you want to do? I want to solve these 5 problems. I have a huge cart abandonment problem. I want to solve it. Okay, go ahead, solve it. You know that cart abandonment is a problem for you. Not too many people know that. Not too many people really know that is a problem. You know that your drop rates are 70%. You don't know that the industry average is 50%. Or there are sites who do better in the same category. You don't know that. We do now. And now we are making these people smart by telling them that, hey, in the last 5 days, we have figured out that there has been a spike downwards in your total conversions. And we figure that morning hours you're not selling on an average as what you used to sell in the last 6 months. Why don't you try this? Why don't you try happy hour targeting? Ultimately, the aim is to convert. But how is gradually changing for us. We are now empowering it with more data, more analytics, and thereby making you a bit more smarter in terms of what choices you can make.
Got it. Yeah. Ritvik, tell us a little bit from the VC perspective. When you meet a product team, how much are you assessing their design kind of ethos and their ability to kind of understand good design upfront? How much you're assessing their ability to analyze and be analytical about their business and their product, right? How much does that play a factor, right, in you picking up and investing in a company maybe?
So, and I think it plays a fairly important factor in terms of investing in a company. So when we look at a company, yes, the design is very important, but we look for certain proxy parameters, which kind of define what you're talking about. And there are 3 or 4 proxy parameters which kind of indicate that whether this team has the right sense of design or not. One is, I think, whenever they're pitching or whenever they're talking about their product, are they thinking actually on talking from the customers or the end user's point of view or not? And that's a very, very strong signal as to where the mindset of the entrepreneur or the product is. Are they inwardly focused, or are they really building for somebody else and are able to measure it or not? The second thing is, look at the metrics. And there are many entrepreneurs that I sometimes meet who actually build something in vacuum and have no metrics to talk about, how the product is doing, whether the product is, performing, not performing, usage. And they may just talk about very high-level metric, which is the revenue, but they don't know anything about the second level or the third level of metrics. And that, again, is a very strong signal that they don't know how to think of terms of design. They don't have the ability to marry the art of gut and instinct along with the science which data provides. And in today's world, I think it's more and more important that you need to be able to marry your gut and instinct along with the data or the science side of things to be successful. So personally, I'm no judge to tell you whether your product design is good or bad at this point in time, but I would look at these proxy parameters to actually evaluate whether you have that sense or not.
Got it. It hasn't got to the point where you ask your potential companies to give you their Google Analytics login, right? to audit them in the due diligence?
Yes, yes.
You do that now?
I do that, yes, I do that. So if it's a B2C web-facing company, I think if we like enough, I do look at the Google Analytics account access and actually go through it in fairly detail. And probably, given my background, I have the advantage of being able to understand that, but that's an important criteria.
Got
Yes.
it. And increasingly, many firms have experts on their staff, right? That to do exactly that, because it's such a data-driven world now. Chetan, tell us a little bit about, and it's open question to all three of you, bringing people on board and, imbibing, kind of injecting them with a sense of this both design and, data-driven culture, right? How easy is that? How long does it take to get a team to, to that level that, they're performing great on these metrics?
Sure. So if I look at the heart of the question that you asked, it's essentially product management for me. The kind of coordination between components when the train is moving fast is relatively lower. So each of them essentially need to have their own sense of integrity around design, focus around design, and client centricity, as Rutvik mentioned, to keep the sort of ball rolling. The second bit is when you think of the big bets and the creativity question that you asked, while the incremental things can be driven by data, what we have found in our limited experience is you essentially also need to figure out where the puck is moving, not just where it is right now, and find kind of a placeholder for yourself or there. And some of those guys, again, essentially have a great gut that goes with data, which says, though the trend is not showing this way up now, just because of these three hypotheses, it's very likely to sort of show that way. Yeah, so I would focus on product management function as one of the core areas when we think of design and making it superior in the company's kind of setup.
Thank you very much. A big round of applause for the panelists, Avlesh, Rutvik,